Have you ever wondered why some men seem destined for failure, while others, starting from the same point, build immense fortunes and leave eternal legacies? Have you ever felt like you were stuck on a treadmill, working hard, trying to do everything right, and yet, nothing changes? I know that feeling not from hearing it from others, but because I've lived it myself. I was broke, humiliated, invisible. But there is a dividing line that separates the defeated from the empire builders. And today I'm going to show you 7 dead weights I had to abandon to build my fortune, forge my leadership, and become a man impossible to ignore. If you continue to waste your life with the mistakes we're going to expose here, nothing will change. But if you have the courage to abandon these mental addictions and self-sabotaging attitudes, your life will change with the speed and force of an empire in the making. And yes, that empire will be yours. Now, if this kind of direct truth and real transformation interests you, you're in the right place. Stay with me until the end and subscribe to this channel, because here, I don't give you fleeting motivation. I give you power. Let's get started. The first thing I gave up was the need for approval. Do you want to know the fastest way to poverty? Trying to please everyone. A man who lives seeking applause never listens to his own conscience. I had to bury my desire to look good in the eyes of others, to start building something real in my own eyes. When I started building my fortune, many people laughed. They said I was dreaming too big, that I should be more realistic. I responded with silence and work. The truth is that the applause will come, but only after you win. Before that, they will mock you. And that's part of the process. Empires are built in silence, brick by brick, without an audience. The second thing I gave up was the addiction to comparison. While I spent time looking at the success of others, my life stagnated. There is nothing more paralyzing than watching others reap what they have sown without planting your own seeds. I discovered that comparison is a refined form of cowardice. It distracts us, weakens us, and kills our identity. So I made a pact. I would only compare my life today with my life yesterday. And I would only accept as a rival the man I was last week. That gave me focus. That gave me power. That gave me progress. The third thing I needed to abandon was the scarcity mindset. This is the silent cancer of most who fail. Believing that there is not enough, that someone else's success diminishes yours, that money is a zero-sum game. I had to rip that belief out by the roots. Abundance only comes to those who act as if it already exists. When I started investing, even with little, I did so boldly. When I started hiring people better than me, even though I was afraid, I did so with faith. The scarcity mindset kept me in a cycle of survival. The abundance mindset led me to mastery. The fourth thing I abandoned: procrastination disguised as preparation. Many say they are studying, planning, waiting for the right moment. That's a lie. They are afraid. And fear disguised as prudence is what causes a decade to pass and nothing to happen. I was that man. I studied, read, listened to advice, but I didn't act. Until I understood, imperfect action builds empires. Planning without action is just a fancy excuse for stagnation. And then I decided, any plan that couldn't be started in the next 24 hours was nothing but an illusion. The fifth thing I gave up was spending time with mediocre people. That decision was tough. Some were childhood friends, others were co-workers. But I realized that your environment shapes you. If you hang out with people who complain about life, you get sick. If you surround yourself with people who laugh at discipline, soon you'll be laughing too only at your own misery. I replaced conversations about football and gossip with discussions about efficiency, profit, and long-term vision. And when that happened, my mind stopped being a swamp and became a forge. The sixth thing I gave up was romanticism about suffering. There is a culture that glorifies suffering as if it were a virtue. It is not. Suffering can be noble if it transforms But living in suffering as if it makes you morally superior is poison. I had to understand that money is not dirty, that prosperity is not a sin, that lightness is not futility. And when I accepted that being rich was a duty to myself, to my family, to the world I wanted to impact, I began to prosper. It was that simple. And finally, the seventh thing I gave up was lack of emotional discipline. I was a slave to my emotions. If I woke up in a bad mood, I didn't work. If someone criticized me, I spent days brooding over it. That cost me dearly. I learned the hard way that an empire is built with steel, not sensitivity. Emotional discipline is what separates the great from the ordinary. You need to learn to act despite fear, to focus despite anger, to maintain your routine despite frustration. Because if your mind is an emotional minefield, your fortune will never grow. You will be the invisible enemy of your own success. These were the 7 anchors I needed to let go of. And each one was a battle. But I tell you this with complete clarity, if I hadn't let go of these things, I would still be broke. And more than that, I would be wasting my life. Now I want you to tell me in the comments, which of these 7 anchors do you recognize in your life today? Which one are you going to let go of this week? Answer honestly. Because only those who confront their own mediocrity can overcome it. You need to understand one thing definitively. There are no miracles for those who continue to feed the same habits of failure. What transforms a broken man into a millionaire is not luck or the mercy of fate. It is a succession of tough, lonely, and often unpopular decisions. When I found myself surrounded by debt and contempt, I realized that no one was coming to rescue me, and that realization set me free. It was at that exact moment that I started to build, and it all started with a brutal choice. I became intolerant of everything that kept me small. But look, abandoning old habits is not enough. You need to replace them with principles of empire. Absolute efficiency became my guiding light. Every action, every hour, every person around me was evaluated under a single criterion. Does it contribute to growth, or does it slow down the process? And I learned that efficiency begins in the mind. As long as your mind is at war with itself, you will be slow, confused, and unproductive. That's why, every day when I woke up, before even checking the clock, I would set my state of mind. Waking up in control of your mind is more valuable than waking up with money in your account. Because the mind forges gold. An empire begins with the invisible. It is born when you say no to everything that wastes your energy. People who complain, news that weakens you, distractions disguised as entertainment. I closed the door on all of that. And in doing so, silence gave me something no one had ever given me before. Clarity. Clarity about who I was, what I wanted to build, and what I needed to destroy in myself to get there. Another vital choice that transformed my trajectory was to take radical control of my time. Listen to this. Whoever controls your schedule controls your life. I was a slave to improvisation, hostage to the urgencies of others, a prisoner of distraction, until I realized that the absence of a structured routine was one of the main factors keeping me poor. So I established a relentless order to my days. Not like a robot, but like an empire builder. Because time is the cement of greatness. Wasting it is burying your own history before you even write it. In the process, another truth emerged. The importance of choosing superior allies. At first, I tried to do everything myself. Out of pride. Out of fear of being betrayed. Out of ego. But I learned from life and from business that true power does not lie in doing everything yourself, but in surrounding yourself with talented people who broaden your vision. I started hiring people who were better than me, to trust, to delegate intelligently, and in doing so, I discovered that leading is not about controlling. It's about unleashing the power in others. A true empire is a living organism, and each person in the right place becomes a vital organ for its expansion. Productivity is no longer an option, but a philosophy of life. I don't work for the sake of working. Every task I perform has a purpose, a direct connection to my ultimate goals. I eliminated unnecessary rushing and replaced it with focus. I learned that speed without direction is just movement, and movement without results is waste. I learned to measure progress not by what I do, but by what I accomplish. And when you start thinking in terms of impact, everything changes. You work less, earn more, and rest better. Perhaps the biggest turnaround, however, has been spiritual. No, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about mission. About non-negotiable purpose. When I discovered that the wealth I was building was not just for me, but to serve, transform, and bless other lives, my energy multiplied. Waking up with purpose makes you unbeatable. And at that point, I understood something that changed my destiny. Generosity is not charity. It is strategy. It is an alliance with the flow of abundance. When I started giving intentionally time, money, knowledge, the universe responded. Because everything you offer comes back multiplied, but only when it is given with clarity and vision. And in this process of giving, one of the most important decisions I made was to abandon any idea of wealth without legacy. I'm not here to accumulate money. I'm here to build something that will last beyond my existence. And that mindset of eternity changes everything. You start to reject shortcuts. You start to build with materials that can withstand storms. You start to invest in people, not just results. You start living with urgency, but without desperation. Each of these decisions took me one step further. But none of them would have been possible if I hadn't stopped lying to myself. Yes, that is the root of transformation. Stop deceiving yourself. I had to look in the mirror and admit that my excuses were just disguises for my laziness, my fear, and my lack of discipline. It was painful, but it was liberating. And on that day, I stopped being a victim. I became the architect of my empire. Now I want you to answer me. What is the lie you still tell yourself every day? The lie that keeps you stuck, stagnant, waiting for something or someone who will never come. Comment below. Declare war on that lie. Because only when it is destroyed can your truth be born. When I finally cut all the ties that kept me small, I realized something that few have the courage to see. The life I was living was a direct consequence of the permissions I gave myself. Allowing weak thoughts, allowing excuses, allowing waste. All of this was like signing a contract with mediocrity every day. But when I broke that contract, when I demanded a new standard from myself, the world began to respond. Because the world always responds to attitude, not intention. And perhaps the most brutal of all the standards I had to reformulate was the financial one. Money, for me, was a problem. It always slipped away, it was always lacking. Until I stopped treating it like a problem and started treating it like an ally. And more than that, like a servant. Because money should never be your master. It should be a tool for your construction. And for that, I had to learn to respect it. The first step was simple but transformative. I never spent a penny without a strategic reason. Every dollar that left my pocket had to fulfill a mission, multiply itself, save me time, or expand my vision. I started thinking like an investor. And investors don't buy things, they buy the future. If it didn't produce a return, emotional, financial, or intellectual, I didn't buy it. Financial discipline is one of the invisible bridges that connect poverty to wealth, but few cross it because it requires sacrifice. And I sacrificed. Yes, I sacrificed the superfluous to achieve the extraordinary. I learned to differentiate between desire and need, to ruthlessly cut out what was vanity, disguised as comfort. I began to study money like an engineer studies, a bridge with precision, curiosity, and reverence. Money is not mystical. It is mathematical. It obeys laws, and the first of these is simple. If you don't control your spending, you will never control your destiny. I learned to record, analyze, and predict. And even more, I learned to reinvest. My first profit was small, but instead of celebrating, I reinvested. And I did that 100 times before allowing myself any luxury. That repetition built not only my fortune, but my authority over it. At that point, I also understood that every rich man needs a mission greater than his own pocket. Money for money's sake is poison. But money for legacy, for impact, for transformation, is pure fuel. When I linked my financial growth to a social, spiritual, and family purpose, everything gained speed. Because life only gives you what you are prepared to multiply. And generosity without structure is chaos. So my mission was clear: to build an unshakable structure that would sustain my generosity, and that is done with planning. At the beginning of each month, I would sit like a general in front of a war map. I would outline scenarios, cut excesses, and allocate resources strategically. I created categories, goals, and deadlines. Because every empire begins with order. And a man without order is doomed to repetition. The repetition of suffocation, anxiety, of I don't know where my money went. I knew every penny had a name, a function, and a destination. But none of that would have been worth anything if I hadn't learned to think long term. That was perhaps the most painful change. Because I was addicted to immediate results. I wanted everything, fast, everything now. And the now is the enemy of the lasting. That's when I developed a philosophy of progressive construction. I began to see my life as a building, and each choice as a brick. That gave me patience, it gave me clarity. And more importantly, it gave me consistency. Because one brick, a day, as simple as it may seem, builds a fortress in a few years. But the average person doesn't see that. They want to build castles in a week, and, frustrated, they give up. And then they return to the cycle of haste, debt, and collapse. Not me. I decided to be patient like the builders of cathedrals. People who work for decades on something they may never see finished, but which will be eternal. And when you start acting like that, the universe respects you. The right people show up. Opportunities reveal themselves. Time ceases to be your enemy and becomes your partner. Because the long term is the sacred ground where greatness flourishes. But only visionaries tread there. The short-sighted remain stuck in the quagmire of haste. And if there is one thing that differentiates the common man from the man who builds legacies, it is this: the common man works for a salary, the visionary builds wealth. The common man wants to survive, the visionary wants to dominate, and domination requires planning, vision, and control. I started thinking like a wealth manager before I even had any wealth. I learned to read financial reports, understand cash flow, and simulate investments. Not because I was rich, but because I wanted to be. And the world respects those who act like they've already arrived. Maybe now you're asking yourself, but Carnegie, where do I start? Start with order. With control of your time, your money, your mind. Stop looking for magic formulas and start building systems. Your freedom lies in the routine you resist adopting. Your fortune lies in the choices you avoid out of fear of appearing radical, and I'll tell you the harsh truth. The world already has too many people trying to please everyone. What it needs is decisive, disciplined men who are willing to pay the price of greatness. I've had to understand something that changed the game forever. Your life will never exceed your standards. Ever you may get lucky. You may even win the lottery of opportunity for a moment. But if your standards remain low, your reality will return to the basement where you've always lived. Because the universe gives you back exactly what you tolerate. What you accept is what you perpetuate. And I accepted a life of scarcity, of haste, of fear, for too long, until I rebelled against it. And I decided to elevate everything. Everything, elevate my vocabulary, my schedule, my relationships, my goals, my emotions, my clothes, my things, and most importantly, my silent decisions. Because it is these invisible decisions that define your empire, the ones that no one sees, but you know. The time you choose to wake up, what you eat when no one is looking, What you watch when the world is asleep. What you think when everything goes wrong. These are the roots of your future. And it was in this underground that I rewrote my story. I turned my morning into a war ritual. It wasn't about waking up early. It was about waking up ready. The common man wakes up and is swallowed by chaos. The imperial man wakes up and imposes order on the day. I chose to be the architect of my awakening, and that changed everything. I prepared myself like a warrior going to the front. Meditation, silence, strategic reading, reviewing goals, visualizing victory. None of these rituals cost money, but they all require decision. And that's why few maintain them, because they are simple, but they are not easy. And look, the modern world loves to complicate what is essential. But I have learned that the most powerful empires were built on simple principles applied with absurd discipline. There is no magic secret, there is disciplined repetition. While others were looking for new miracle formulas, I was refining the basics. And those basics made me grow while others stagnated. Because discipline is not punishment, it is freedom. The freedom to no longer depend on chance, to not live at the mercy of your emotions, to no longer be held hostage by yesterday. And at that point, I understood something that few understand. Leadership begins with you. Before you can lead businesses, people, or resources, you need to lead yourself. Most people want to lead others without even being able to quiet their own minds, without being able to stick to a routine for 7 days, without mastering their own bodies. How can someone like that expect to lead teams, finances, markets? They can't, because leadership isn't a position, it's an attitude, it's a choice, it's a way of life. I began leading my own transformation with an iron fist. I no longer accepted excuses. If I said I was going to do something, it was done. If I promised something, I delivered. And if I didn't, I corrected myself. I created a system of personal goals with consequences. If I failed, there was a price to pay. If I succeeded, there was a reward. Simple, brutal, effective. And that forged a version of me that no one could stop. Because I started to trust myself. And true self-confidence is born when you keep your word to yourself, day after day. Over time, this silent strength began to attract people. Good, competent, ambitious people. And I realized that leadership generates magnetism, that greatness attracts greatness, and that when you become a source of clarity, purpose, and direction, others naturally align themselves with you. I started to build my team. Not based on friendship or convenience, but based on values. People who were on the same wavelength, who didn't complain, didn't blame, didn't stop. People who wanted to build something lasting. And then everything gained momentum. My business grew. My ideas multiplied. My influence spread. Because when you lead with integrity, efficiency, and purpose, the world takes notice. It may not recognize it right away. But sooner or later, it bows down. Because there is nothing more powerful than a man who knows where he is going, and what he will no longer tolerate in his life. And speaking of not tolerating, I need to tell you something. If you still allow the constant presence of distractions, vices disguised as rest, and people who hold you back, you are not building an empire. You are decorating a prison cell. It's hard to hear, I know, but it's necessary. Because real transformation requires exclusion. You will need to exclude habits, beliefs, people, environments. And yes, it will hurt. But I prefer the pain of exclusion now to the pain of eternal stagnation. Because there are only two paths: temporary discomfort or permanent failure. And on this journey, one key has become central: conscious decision-making. Mediocre men decide based on emotion. The imperial man decides based on purpose. I started asking myself, does this bring me closer to or further away from the life I want? Simple as that. And if it did, it was cut out. No negotiation, no drama, no regrets, because every choice either builds or destroys. And when you see that clearly, you start living with a different kind of intensity. That intensity, by the way, is what starts to separate you from the masses. They notice it. They feel it. They know you're different. Not because of what you wear, but because of what you exude. Because of your posture. Because of how you speak. Because of your firmness. And that is leadership. Silent leadership. Contagious. Indestructible. Someone once asked me, Carnegie, what is the biggest sign that someone is ready to get truly rich? And I answered without hesitation, it's when a person stops chasing money and starts building systems that bring it to them. The man who gets rich is not the one who works the hardest, it's the one who structures the best. The one who organizes, who anticipates, who repeats winning processes with almost military efficiency. And that's how I did it. When I stopped trading time for money and started scaling solutions, everything changed. The first expansion I built wasn't a new business. It was a new mindset. I broadened my vision, increased my ambition, and multiplied my ability to withstand pressure. Because growth requires emotional structure before it requires physical structure. Many fail not because of a lack of profit, but because of a lack of mental preparation to deal with the challenges of success. Yes, success tests you as much as failure does. It reveals your insecurities, amplifies your weaknesses, attracts envy, and generates pressure. And if you're not ready, you implode. So I prepared myself to prosper with discretion, to expand without getting distracted, to lead with firmness and not with vanity. Because when money comes, it will test your essence. If you are fragile, it will destroy you. If you are solid, it will elevate you. So before expanding my wealth, I strengthened my character. And that gave me a foundation to grow without losing my center. The second big turning point was understanding the power of influence. And here's a hard truth. You only become truly rich when you can influence people with your vision. It's not enough to be good. You need to be perceived as indispensable. You need to communicate clearly, lead with courage, and inspire with actions. I started to refine my communication. I learned to sell ideas, move people, and generate collective results. And I realized that those who master influence build wealth quickly. But beware, influence without consistency is a sham. And shams have an expiration date. That's why I established a rule. Never promise what you can't deliver. Never say what you don't practice yourself. And never inspire with words what you are not willing to suffer to live. This created a natural authority in me. People didn't follow me because I was charismatic. They followed me because they saw consistency. Because they knew that my words came from scars, not theories. With that foundation, I started to scale businesses. Not out of an impulse to grow, but out of a strategy to multiply impact. Each new project had to meet 3 criteria: solve a real problem, be operationally efficient, and scale autonomously. If it didn't meet those 3, it was discarded. Because expansion without criteria is self-sabotage. Many are deluded by growth and end up creating a monster that devours them. Not me. I became obsessed with processes. I systematized everything, from customer service to team culture, and that allowed me to grow without losing the soul of the business. Another crucial decision was to invest heavily in intelligence. While others bought cars, I bought books. While others changed cell phones, I hired mentors. While others flaunted fleeting achievements, I built assets that would give me eternal returns. I took courses, participated in masterminds, sat at the table with giants. And in doing so, I shortened paths, avoided mistakes, and gained speed. I learned that purchased intelligence is worth more than hard-earned experience. Because the time you save by learning from the mistakes of others is the time you accelerate toward the top. And with growth came the privilege of multiplying knowledge, opportunities, resources. I started investing in others. I trained leaders. I created legacies. And in doing so, I discovered something that few understand. Generosity is the highest stage of wealth. It's not how much you have, it's how much you sustain in others. And that's not measured by sporadic donations. It's measured by your ability to train people who train other people. It's measured by the longevity of the impact you make. It's measured by the depth of the transformation you bring about. I started out as a broken man, full of fears, debts, doubts. Today, I lead legacies, create jobs, train leaders, and create solutions that impact thousands. And it all started with 7 brutal decisions to abandon something. 7 renunciations, 7 internal resignations, 7 breaks with mediocrity. Today, I look back and see that every pain, every fall, every humiliation had a purpose. They prepared me, they sculpted me. They made me Carnegie, and now, it's your turn. The question isn't whether you'll succeed. The question is, how long will you tolerate living below your potential? Because the empire you want already exists. It's in the next decision. In the next cut. In the next firm, yes. You're closer than you think. You just need to stop lying to yourself. Have you noticed? Life is constantly trying to wake you up. In disappointments, in debts, in broken relationships, in constant dissatisfaction. These are all alarms. Cries from destiny saying, you were born for more. And the problem isn't failure. The problem is when failure becomes a way of life. When you get used to having little, when you settle for emotional, financial, and spiritual crumbs. And let me tell you a truth that perhaps no one has had the courage to tell you before. If you continue to accept this, it will no longer be the fault of circumstances. It will be yours. Because now you know. Now you've heard. Now you've been called, and the big question remains, what are you going to do with this truth? You can close this video and go back to your routine. You can return to the comfort that is silently killing you. You can continue complaining about the rich, the politicians, the system. You can repeat the excuses your parents used. Or you can decide. And if you decide, then listen to me carefully. Abandon everything that diminishes you. Eliminate every distraction. Cut every tie with mediocrity. This is your mission. And it starts now. You don't need more courses, more videos, more tips. You need attitude and action. Courageous, definitive, unavoidable. The man who builds empires is not the one who has all the answers. He is the one who no longer tolerates living without direction. He may be broken, but his mind is already a millionaire. He may be lonely, but his vision is already filled with greatness. He may have nothing, but he carries everything within himself. And that's why he's unstoppable. Because empire doesn't start in the bank account, it starts in the spirit, in the blood, in the decision. And if you ask me, Carnegie, what do I do now? I'll tell you exactly what I would do if I were in your place, because I've been there. First, choose a new standard, a pattern of behavior, of routine, of responsibility, and make that pattern non-negotiable. Second, set goals that scare you. Yes, goals that keep you up at night, that force you to grow, that force you to abandon the old you. Third, build an ironclad routine, a sequence of daily actions that are impossible to sabotage. Because a solid routine builds freedom. Fourth, surround yourself with giants. Cut off access to those who pull you down. Increase the price of your presence. Only allow those who vibrate at the same frequency around you. And fifth, start now with what you have. The way you can but start, because no one wins standing still. And the moment you start, something extraordinary will happen. You will discover strengths you never knew you had. You will access a clarity you have never experienced. You will attract people, resources, and opportunities that once seemed unattainable, because the world bows down to those who stand with conviction. And in that moment, you will cease to be just another person. You will become a leader, a builder, an example, a living empire. This is my call to you. Stop wasting your life. Abandon everything that keeps you small. Take your place among the great. Because the world is tired of lukewarm, indecisive, disorganized people. The world needs leaders. Men and women who know where they want to go and are willing to pay the price. Be that leader. Become that presence. Build that legacy. And if this video has awakened something in you, if it has torn down some internal lie, if it has rekindled some forgotten flame, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it with those who need to hear it, with those who need to wake up, with those you know are lost but can still be saved. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to keep giving you the kind of truth that no one else has the courage to speak. And together, we're going to build empires. This was just the beginning. Now, it's up to you.